I'm Sasa Radic. I'm a practicing architect from Croatia. I'm based in Rijeka and Zagreb. And apart from practicing architecture and planning, I'm also involved in teaching and research projects, and I was particularly focused on our coastal territory in past 10 years. I've been here only for 2 days, but I saw a couple of challenges or emergencies that are similar to what we are experiencing in Croatia. And first of all, I think it's the control of or transformation of the system, construction system, which is obviously creating here, like it's creating in Croatia, informal settlements, how we call them here, or illegal constructions, how we call them back home. And it's a problem which is not easy to deal with. It is perhaps less a problem of planning, but it is more a problem of how the society functions. And it's actually showing, it's like a temperature. When you have a disease, temperature is an indicator that something is going on wrong. So that's one phenomenon which is actually very important to start dealing with. Now the second, I think perhaps the biggest challenge is the coast, Albanian coast, which is quite long. It is, as far as I understand, in pretty good condition. And we had incredible pressure on our coast, and probably is something that is going to happen here, or it's already happening here. And on one hand is the biggest advantage, or the biggest resource our countries have, but on the other hand, the territory is limited. So once the territory is consumed, it is impossible to kind of undo, to rewind the whole story back. So that in a sense requires a careful planning. So my impression was that, for example, lack of accessibility to certain parts of the territory is actually a big advantage. So it kind of gives a moment of pause, given the magnitude of the pressure of construction sector, which is obviously visible in Albania as well. And we have experienced that in our coast in recent years, because what happened after the initial transformation in the 90s, we had a completely new challenges on the coast. Previously, the industry was the biggest problem because it was consuming the best parts of the coastline, and suddenly, with opening of the market, especially to the European market, the real estate sector became the biggest threat, or the biggest consumer of the territory. So what the government was trying to do, and it was like a cat catching its own tail, it was trying to follow the processes on the ground by constantly changing the laws and applying the solutions that were working in the 70s. But the problem was obviously that the mechanisms that worked then didn't work now. So we had a moratorium on construction which lasted for, I think, 2 years, and it didn't really bring much good because life is obviously bringing some sort of a pressure. But I think overall there was a change of mentality, and I think this is quite important because society at the end or state is a result of will of people who are forming a society. So in that sense, it's not enough, or it's not simply enough or it's not possible to control it through a set of rules or regulations, which are obviously needed, but it's important also to increase the awareness of people about the quality of the territory. And I think this is what happened in Croatia, because initially it was, you could have seen quite often a construction along the coast, and the earth which was digged out was simply thrown into the sea, and you don't actually see these situations anymore. So I guess, I mean, which is pretty logical, because if you destroy the beach, who on earth is going to come to be in your place? So I think this combination of things, of innovative strategies, which have to be clearly suitable for each context, of increased awareness, and of course of creative people combining their forces together, one can go ahead. But I think also one big advantage is that you do not have a densely populated territory, and this is, I think, rare these days, and especially if you compare the coastline of Italy and Spain to your coastline, then what you perhaps see as critical is actually not that critical if you put it in objective relationships. not sure that competitions will definitely give the final proposal for a regional plan, for example. But this is a good tool to involve general public in a discussion, because if the general public sees what different opportunities are there for a territory to be developed, then can be a debate. Because what happens now in most parts of Europe is that debates about physical planning and detailed planning are very abstract. They're lacking the form, and they're lacking especially the involvement of inhabitants. I think the main focus should be on financing, and it doesn't sound very conceptual, but at the end someone has to pay for all these things, and the problem is that usually the financial institutions are very conservative, so they're looking for conservative models that have been already tried elsewhere. So if you want to start with a kind of innovative approach, it's really critical to have also creative thinking in the way how the operations are going to be financed. Because it's in most cases, of course, the financial sector is looking to make a project feasible, and it's not that much interesting to make the other bits of the puzzle work, like public infrastructures and roads, etc. So I would say that's the second very important agent.